Hi everybody. Video number 3, um, based on more questions. I got about 6, 7 questions I should compare. What do Germans think of America, or what do Europeans think of America at this point? And again, things have changed really radically. Let me be honest. I've been here for 25 years, and how the United States has been viewed in this time, I would say, let me just start like 25 years ago. And again, I'm trying to wing it. I have some information here, but 25 years ago when I came here, almost 30 years ago, anything that was American was seen positive. America was like known for its dynamicism, for its, go get 'em approach, thinking positive, working hard, because they knew we worked harder in the U.S. than, most Europeans here with their long vacations. So, um, and the soft power. And please Google soft power. Anybody that's studied political science knows what soft power is. If you're thinking, what is soft power, just to make it simple, are you popular? Are you Gucci? Are you, Mercedes? Are you, Jaguar, basically? So you are in, and the U.S. was in. The entire sense of culture and everything. It was all there. From a positive point of view, they would think of rock and roll, and they would think of jazz, and they would think of all these kind of things, and automatically there was some kind of like a positiveness there. Also, democracy. Let's be honest. The land of democracy. Where the land of unlimited possibilities and all. It was all there. Um, there were some negative stereotypes. We can talk about the stereotypes as well. One of the biggest stereotypes at the time that I really didn't appreciate it. In most of Germany and France that I've traveled to, even in Greece sometimes, they say, "Oh well, the Americans have no culture." I hate that. Why? Because they consider if it's not old, it's not really culture, and it's you know uh, abstract to say the least when you're seeing a guy wearing blue jeans, wearing a baseball cap, never played baseball in his life. He listens to, I don't know, rock and roll music, and at the same time he's telling you that America has no culture, and he might be from a town somewhere in Upper Bavaria with a very small population. So you do have those stereotypes, that everybody's a cowboy. We have them too, the Germans with the lederhosen and, all that kind of stuff, living up in the Alps, which is probably less than 10% of the population. But, you do have that as a negative stereotype. But definitely it was more of a positive image, and somebody that has traveled extensively, um, even after all this stuff has happened. I would say that image was pretty well across the board, no matter where you went. There were some times where you're better off, obviously, not being, the image of America is way off, very negative. But basically, in Germany, in Europe, where I traveled extensively, it was definitely very positive. Um, Now, why has it changed so extremely and so fast? I mean, obviously, the new politics involved, especially, let me just get to the point really. The first thing that really started it was the the entire tariffs. Um, the language of they're taking advantage of us. They're that they're ripping us off. This is the official language going out there. These verbal attacks basically on the European way of life and all that kind of stuff. Um, it was not highly seen as a positive issue. And I'll go into what news is saying here and how they're looking at it. But some of the issues you might look at it yourself. Germany, especially being affected by the auto industry and stuff like that. Um, the way they look at it, or not the auto industry here, but basically the consumers. And this is going to be the most important thing. Being soft power is lost. The soft power of the USA having a positive image and being a positive country, I would say 75% of that is just gone. And there are obviously people that are going to, support, Trump and this whole conservative issue. There are lots of them. Hungary, for example, but let's not look at the exception to the rule. In fact, the exception proves exactly that it's the exception that the rule is. There's been, in fact, a swing towards more liberal and more progressive parties because of everything that's going on in the USA. It's kind of strange because the best thing that probably ever happened to liberal parties here was that Trump actually won power because it gave a negative image. And let me explain a few things regarding the cars. I think anybody that's come to Europe can verify this. This is the difference between reality and just, populism, simple sentences to make it look simple where it's not. If I have, again, some facts here. A Ford F-150 pickup trucks, the Dodges, all these kind of cars are the number one sold American cars. Now, if you've ever come to Europe, you'd never make it with these kind of cars. The parking spaces alone, never mind driving through little towns and stuff like that. So they're, supersized, which we love in America. We love big. And they're overpowered. The price of gas here is, God, what is it? It's like 160, 170. That's like almost $2 a liter. So we're talking like $7.50 a gallon. There's no way that people are looking into 6-cylinder and 8 cylinders, and they just don't look into that. Taxes are expensive on cars. The bigger the motor, the more money you pay in taxes. So, it's not the tariffs that are preventing the cars from coming here. It's actually quite stupid, and the proof of that is anybody that wants to just look at it. The Japanese and the Koreans are selling cars here like crazy. Why though? They're smaller cars. They're economical. Like they adapt to the European market with different products, and that's why. Also, the U.S. The German manufacturers, like most of their money, they don't really care that much. But because obviously they're producing, Mercedes, BMW is producing in the U.S. anyway. But it does. If people think that that's the only reason, another thing, the tariffs on food and stuff like that, where you heard the sentences, "Our great beef" and stuff like that, and "Our great meats," and they won't buy them, and this is just purely regulation. That's just the way it is. That negativism that we're getting, they understand that you're basically asking the European, then you should accept, chicken that's been bleached before it gets there, illegal. You should accept chicken that has been fed hormones. So, it's not 6 months. It looks like, a 15-pound roaster, where here they're only like 2-3 pounds. All that kind of stuff. Soya milk, if it's genetically modified, it's not going to, they can change the laws to appeal to the Americans, but I don't think they're going to change the laws. And that created a lot of negativism, basically saying that, all that. That, on top of a very aggressive type, because I have a couple of friends from Denmark, and the whole Greenland issue created a huge effect on negativity. This whole thing, Denmark shouldn't have, Greenland, and it's too small of a country, and so on and so on, is obviously an aggressive fact. Denmark, yes, a small country, but they've been able to. I think the negativity rate of Denmark is like 80%, 85%. I mean, I'm surprised it's not over 95%, but regardless, it's very, very high. They're boycotting American products. There's no whiskey. There's no, Coca-Cola even, Pepsi. They're taking it out. You can see that. Please Google it. There's advertisement everywhere. Don't buy American. If they put tariffs, the best tariff we have against America is your buying power. Just don't buy. I don't know where this is going. I'm just talking about soft power and image. I'm not going to go into the economics. Is this good or bad? I don't give a fuck, I do, but it's not really the issue. The issue is, the image of America, and trying to explain how it's turned negatively in such a quick time. Another issue is the way they look at it. Again, from here, is maybe it's not a big issue in the U.S., but they made it a big issue here, is the whole Canadian issue. that they should be the 51st state, and he's just going to be a governor of Canada, and even the Europeans took that really seriously. If you remember, Britain and the European Union um, decided to join with Canada to create like their own mini free trade agreement, which really pissed Trump off. So all this is making the U.S. look like the aggressor. They are no longer the guarantor. They are now the factor that obviously is the aggressive factor. They never expected this. It was a wake-up call for the Europeans and the Germans. They didn't, nobody really expected this. And, if you read the news, there seems to be like no direct pattern of why this is happening. They always thought they were allies, especially Canada. And once that happened in Canada, everybody's thinking like, there's just nobody safe. We can't rely on the United States when it comes down to the nitty gritty, kind of. This is again just the image thing, the way they present it here. This whole NATO, that they're using us, the Europeans for NATO, and we spend more money. They don't necessarily see that. The only time NATO has ever actually called its chapter for a common attack was against Afghanistan, which is strange because it was a European war. But basically, this whole, is the USA as ally? It's gone, and along with that is the image. Now, to continue, this is the after thing. Now, if you look at what the right-wing media here is doing, they're basically agreeing. They're basically saying, there's no clear plan. It just seems like, the whole tariffs and thing, it just seems to be they were using examples here that kind of scare them. It's like, Brazil, we had an agreement. Now we don't have an agreement because the guy I don't like the justice system in your country. Therefore, more tariffs. You understand. So the Europeans even are thinking, wait a second, do I have to check with on every single issue? You saw that with Canada recognizing Palestine. You see that with France recognizing Palestine. So there's and the United States setting new tariffs just because of those decisions. Basically, any agreement that you make now is no longer valid. That's basically the general image for the right-wing parties. Like they're just basically, they don't trust it. They just don't understand it. In many ways, they don't even view him as conservative. Even the conservative parties here, they just think that he's on a fringe, kind of extreme. Just as an example, if you took the most right-wing popular parties in Germany, the Christian Democrats and the Christian Socialists, yes, socialists, don't be afraid of the word in America, but the Christian Socialists here are probably the most conservative party. It would be like downtown Texas against abortion, really anti-foreign. If they're here, you got to work. If you're not working, get the hell out. That entire attitude. If you ask them, for example, would you like to, get rid of the national healthcare system? They would never. Like 99% of the party, that's just a given. So they don't understand how far right the United States has gone. They don't understand that. They just kind of look like I said, on the fringe. They do understand they like some of the populist things, but basically they're kind of like scared of where it's going down the road. They've also seen left-wing progressive populism rise, and now let's look at a basic level. Let's not look at the political analysts and all this. And you just talk to what are the news? Like on a daily level, which is sensationalism, right? Bad news sells. And this, I think, one of these factors is the worst factor, is the whole. Almost every day on the news in Germany, you see about those two girls who kind of like, a naive European living the high life. You can just cross, and she went to America without having to book the hotel, the two of them. And they were stuck in a nice detention center for 2 weeks. This is on the news here. ICE agents with, the masks and, going around with, full armed and gear and weapons and, especially that mask thing. It creates a sense of fear, man. I mean, it's all the time. And, fear sells. People love fear. I don't understand it, but, it's just on the news, people promote fear. It's like not only are they scared, but they're promoting and telling everybody else, oh my God, you got to be scared and you got to do this. And that's what they're doing here, and that's probably the number one issue. It was just recently in, with a French person. There were, it was another German guy that he went in there legally, into court trying to get an extension, and they basically took him away, and the wife doesn't even know why. She's a U.S. citizen, but this is basically on the news, regardless if it's good or bad. But the thing that scares the most is, like I said, this whole police state. That's the way they're viewing it right now. And like as I watched the news before I prepared this, regardless if it's left wing, right wing, they're looking at this as police state. They're not hiding behind it. For example, Washington D.C. They're comparing the 6th of January, where the National Guard didn't come out, to some guy called what's his name, Big Butt or something like that, or Big Roll or Big Balls, whatever. Yeah, Big Balls. That's what it is. Some guy called Big Balls. So we had the National Guard come out. These kind of things have not happened in Europe. This is a thing of the past, where the police stop. Who are you and where are you from and where are you going? And people with masks alone. It's really scary, and it's a really negative image. So the United States has lost a lot of soft power. Yeah, politically, you can gain more in diplomacy. You can gain a lot more if you're the good guy. If you have the moral high ground, it's always easier, even in a business deal. They're going to look at you definitely with a positive image when you have that soft power. Right now, it's the exact opposite. And it's hard to explain, like, what do they view the Americans? On the one hand, it's a little bit, antiphasis, as the Greeks say, antiphases. Let me give you an example. Like, they used to love, like, for example, that whole American cowboy image, the muscle car. Let me just give you an example, the muscle car, and that whole image of how that's out. You see what I'm trying to say? That's not out. It's completely out. You kind of look like a redneck, and you're uneducated at this point, and it pisses me off because everybody in America is not like that. And I hate it when they stereotype everybody, but that's what's going on right now. They're stereotyping as the Americans as the idiots of the world, that they have no idea what's going on. Well, let's be honest, our geographical knowledge sucks. If we looked at education, I made a small video on education, and you see how literally, the United States, like, really bad. It's embarrassing, but it is true. Like if I ask somebody, who's the president of Mexico and who's the president of Canada, you don't know. Most people in Europe know their country's neighbors, the presidents, and, they get much more involved in geography. They travel a lot more. I should do a video on why Europeans travel, but to keep it short, they have more vacation. But, they do have a greater sense of what's going on in the world. My joke is, God made war so Americans learn geography. So finally we get to see a world map and see what the hell is going on. But that stereotype has been reinforced of that stupid America. Now has been reinforced because of the president. With basically very vindictive. I don't know if I'm wording, I should have been prepared, but it's like vindictive. They're looking at it as, America was that positive image. We can do more. We can do better. We're the good guys. It's now turned into a vindictive state where, freedom of speech and, people getting arrested. We're changing midterm rules. Yesterday was the whole issue of, the filibuster, the California governor. I mean, it's all over the news here as well. More so than in the past. So, Trump has brought attention back to the U.S. politics, but not, unfortunately, in a positive way. There's a negative and a positive that, unfortunately, is turning into a negative. You can Google this. You can see tourism in the United States has just dropped, obviously, from Canada, which was the number one destination. It's down. It's up for Canadians in Greece. It's up for Canadians in England and Scotland. I've been reading about that recently. So, the Canadians are just spending their money somewhere else. Those that have money are going, if they were going to Las Vegas, they'll go to France or Spain. Regardless, just to show you that image, a lot of my friends were like, oh, they always wanted to go to Florida, and now Florida is like with, Alcatraz. It's like it doesn't have a positive image. I don't know if you're trying to, because I try to think long of what that image is. I go to the German American Institute, hang out with American friends. I was there this afternoon. They agree across the board. Even the Trump people, the MAGA people, they agreed that at least here in Germany, that or in Europe, because one of the MAGA guys was just in fact back from uh, God, Czech Republic. But anyway, it just seems to an unsafe country. Nobody wants to go there for tourism. That whole image. Another thing, and probably the last thing, and cheap populism. When if you're looking at the news, and here, like I said, sensationalism, is the whole Trump issue with Epstein. It's almost like on a daily level here, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it almost is a daily level. And I'm being honest, somebody again can correct me, please, if they see news that are saying something different, then show me. Basically, two main differences that you see here compared to what the U.S. news. One is they're surprised here how little publication, or how much publication here there is regarding the whole Epstein, follow the money. Basically, investigative journalism, not, MSNBC and Fox commentary. That's not the news. It's a commentary, and that commentary has a political party behind it. So always take that with a grain of salt. But if you look at it, where the U.S. is going, I forgot my train of thought, people. That's what happens when you wing it. I was talking about the ICE going vacationing and why they're not going. It doesn't even matter. It's the Epstein files. That's what it was. You can see how much I follow up on that issue. But I did watch some news on various channels. Now, follow the money. They're seeing that Epstein and Maxwell and her father, especially look into Maxwell, his father, who was buried with high honors. There were, I think, 8 last members of the Israeli secret services were there during his burial. He was a top agent at the time. His whole connection, that one, and also more importantly, Epstein's connection. Where did he get his money? All of a sudden, it seems that this guy who was just a nobody, ended up having billions of dollars. And as they go through to, I don't remember the names of the people that were given it. This is all Mossad. And this is, by the way, not, commentary. This is fact. Google and just see who these people are and their connections with the Israeli government, and they're surprised that hasn't become even a bigger issue, especially nowadays. What you're seeing, Epstein was together with the former Israeli prime ministers on that airplane, and that Lolita Express. Clinton was on it. Trump. So they're saying here that the Americans are keeping this quiet, not because Clinton was there, not because Trump was there. Here they're considering it that they definitely were in the plane, and it's all very dubious. But they're saying that it's Secret Service. So I'm just trying to give you again a European perspective of how they view things. That it's basically, they're blackmailing everybody on there, and that's what they're saying here. And I don't see as much about it, especially with follow the money and trace to see how he made his money, offshore accounts that he had with companies that were shutting down. They talk a lot about that. They also talk a lot about Melania Trump, her whole connection. You look into that. That's what's popular here. They love sensationalism. Basically she was brought over from an agency that was later proven to, bring younger East European girls desperate to come to the United States, forging papers. These girls were working illegally. This is documented. I've seen reports on these, and this is not a little bit taken out. They're not hiding it, especially with her, I can't remember the word, her Einstein visa, which is, if you look at that alone, you're like, Jesus Christ, how did she end up getting that? She was a genius at something because, as far as they could see, all she did was a couple of naked shoots. They show those here a lot as well. There's just no respect for that kind of, you get to see all her nude photos and stuff. She's not highly respected here. It's basically look at, let's just pick up the next guy that's got money. And that's about it, everybody. I think I covered everything. It's not looking good. Can I say this, though, as a closing statement, is that, things change. Maybe the next president, maybe there's a war, maybe all of a sudden America, things do change radically. It's just, I think it takes a lot longer to build trust back up than it takes time to reduce it, and that's what we've done. We've lost that soft power. It's going to take, a long time to regain that power. All right, everybody, tell me what you think. Time for my bullshit is over. That was a long talk as always.